Hello everyone and welcome. I am so glad you are here today, because what I am about to share with you is something I have been keeping in my email for a while now, and I believe with everything in me that God wants me to share it today. Before I begin, I want to greet every single one of you watching this right now, whether you are watching from America, from Africa, from Europe, from Asia, or anywhere else in this world. You are welcome here. Drop in the comments right now and tell me where you are watching from. I want to see you. I want to know who is in this room with me today. Now, I know some of you came here today carrying something heavy. Maybe you have a prayer request on your heart. Maybe you have been going through something and you have been wondering if God sees it. Drop your prayer request in the comments. We are not going to scroll past it. We are going to stand together and believe God for every single one of those requests, because that is what the body of Christ does. We carry each other. I have been a doctor for over 40 years. I have worked in hospitals across this country. I have seen pandemics. I have seen viruses that spread in ways we did not expect. I have seen sicknesses that walked through our best defenses like they were nothing. I have stood in rooms where people were dying faster than we could help them. I have seen things that most people, thank God, will never have to see in their lifetime. But none of it, not one single thing in 40 years of medicine, comes close to what I am about to share with you. My name is Dr. Harold James Whitfield. I am 82 years old, and I live in Virginia. I'm a retired physician, and on the 17th of February, I had a near-death experience that changed everything I thought I knew about this world, about what is coming, and about why I am still here to tell this story. I did not want to share this. When I came back and I was lying in that hospital bed looking up at the ceiling, I made a decision to keep what I had seen to myself. I told myself that people would not believe me. I told myself that a man of science sharing a story about angels and courtrooms in the afterlife would only embarrass himself. I told myself that the right thing to do was to stay quiet, recover, and live out whatever days I had left in peace. But I cannot stay quiet anymore, because what I was shown on the 17th of February, the things the angel revealed to me one by one as I stood in that empty courtroom, I am watching them begin to happen right now. I am watching the news. I am watching the tension between America and Iran. I am reading the reports, and everything points to the fact that what was shown to me is not a distant future event. It is close. It is very close. From everything I saw, we are talking about days, not years, not months, days. That is why I am writing this now. That is why I cannot wait any longer. Let me tell you what happened on the 17th of February, and then let me tell you what the angel showed me. Because that part is what you really need to hear. I was walking down the hallway of the hospital where I used to work. I had gone back to visit some of the nurses who had been my colleagues for years. It was a normal morning. I had coffee in the car on the way over. I was wearing my regular clothes, not a doctor's coat, because I was just visiting, not working. I was walking toward the elevator when something happened that I cannot fully explain medically even now. My chest did not hurt. My arm did not go numb the way they tell you to watch for. It was more like a switch being turned off, like someone reached into the middle of me and just quietly turned off the power. My legs stopped holding me up and I went down. The nurses responded immediately. They are good at that. What followed was everything you would expect in a hospital when a person's heart stops. The machines, the hands, the voices calling out numbers and instructions. I was not aware of any of it. Because from the moment I hit that floor, I was somewhere else entirely. I was standing in a room. Not a room I recognized, not a room like any I had ever been in before. It was large, very large. The light inside it was soft and even, coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The ceiling was high above me. The walls were far away on both sides, and the shape of the room, the layout of it, was unmistakable once I took it in. It was a courtroom. There were the long rows of benches where people would sit to watch a proceeding. There was the open space at the front where lawyers would stand and argue their cases. There was the elevated platform at the center front, the raised seat, the place where a judge would sit and look down at everything happening below. The judge's seat was empty. Every seat was empty. Every bench, every chair. There was not one single person in that courtroom besides me. No judge, no jury, no lawyers, no guards, no clerks, no visitors. Just the room and its light, and a silence that was so deep and so complete that it felt almost like a sound of its own. I turned slowly, taking in the whole space. I looked down at my hands, and they were my hands, but they felt different. Lighter, less worn. I was not in pain. I was not afraid, which was strange because I think in any normal situation, waking up alone in an enormous empty room would have frightened me. But the fear was not there, just a kind of stillness. That is when I saw him. He was standing near the front of the room, off to one side. And I want to try to describe him as accurately as I can because I think the details matter. He was tall, not tall the way people are tall, tall in a different way. There was light coming from him that was his own light, not a reflection of the room around him, but something that came from inside him and moved outward. It was warm and strong at the same time. When I tried to look directly at his face, I found that I could only hold it for a moment before I had to look slightly away, not because it hurt, but because it was too much for my eyes to take in all at once. He was holding a scroll. It was rolled up neatly, and he held it at his side in one hand. He was looking at me, and in his eyes, which I could see even with the difficulty of looking at him directly, I saw something I recognized from decades of working in medicine. I saw the expression of someone who is carrying important information and is about to deliver it carefully. I had worn that expression myself hundreds of times, standing at the bedside of a patient I needed to tell a hard truth to. He did not speak immediately. He looked at me for a moment in a way that made me feel fully seen, not judged, not examined, seen. Like every part of who I was and every year I had lived was visible to him, and he understood all of it completely. Then he spoke. His voice was calm and clear, not loud, not dramatic. He spoke the way a person speaks when they do not need to perform, because the truth they are carrying is strong enough to stand on its own. He told me first why the courtroom was empty. He said that I should not be confused by the absence of people. He said the absence was not because something had been forgotten or because the proceedings had not yet started. He said the courtroom was empty because the judgment had already been given. The case had already been heard. The judge had already sat in that seat and made his decision. There was no trial left to hold, no evidence left to present, no arguments left to make. The decision was done. He said I was not here to be tried. He said I was here to be shown, to be told what was coming so that I could carry it back and share it with others. Then he looked down at the scroll in his hand. He held it for a moment, the way a person holds something they understand is important and want to handle with care. Then he lifted his eyes back to me and he began. He said that there was something already moving through the population of America, something that most people were feeling but could not name. He described it as an unusual exhaustion, not the tiredness that comes from working hard or sleeping badly. Something deeper, something that sat in the bones and the mind at the same time. He said people were waking up after full nights of sleep feeling like they had not slept at all. He said people were feeling a heaviness in their hearts that they could not explain and could not trace back to any particular cause. He said people were finding it harder to concentrate, harder to think clearly, harder to hold a thought from one moment to the next. He said that people across America were experiencing this, and most of them were telling themselves it was stress, or the news cycle, or the pressure of daily life. They were looking for ordinary explanations because ordinary explanations were more comfortable than the truth. The truth, he said, was that what people were feeling was not coming from inside themselves. It was being put into them. He said that the government of Iran, working alongside others who were not from this earth, had found a way to introduce something into the air. He paused after he said that. He looked at me directly, and I could see that he understood how those words would land on a doctor. He said he was not asking me to be able to explain the science of it. He was asking me to receive the truth of it and carry it forward. He said that the capabilities involved went beyond what American medical science had developed. They had studied the human body, not the way a doctor studies it, to heal it, but the way a person studies a lock, to open it. And they had found a way in. The method was through what went into the air, introduced quietly, designed to work gradually, not to kill immediately but to weaken, to drain, to lower the energy of the spirit and the clarity of the mind until people were easier to confuse, easier to mislead, easier to push in the direction that was wanted. I want to stop here and say that as he was telling me this, I felt something happen in my chest, not physically, deeper than physical. Because even as a doctor, even as a man who had spent 4 decades looking for scientific explanations for everything, I had already been watching something I could not explain. I had seen patients in the months before my collapse who had come to me with exactly what he was describing: the deep tiredness, the confusion, the heaviness of heart with no source they could point to. I had run the tests, everything came back normal, and I had not been able to explain it. Now someone was explaining it to me, and the explanation was terrifying, but it was also the only thing that had ever made what I had seen make sense. He continued. He said that this exhaustion, this draining that was being felt across the country, was not an end in itself. It was preparation. It was the first step in something larger. He said that the weakening of the people was deliberate. A confused, tired, emotionally heavy population was less able to respond, less able to question what it was being told, less able to organize and resist. The people who had introduced this into the air understood that very well. They had planned around it. And then he said this. He said that 3 days after the point when the exhaustion reached its peak across the population, 3 days from that moment, the next thing would happen. The attack. He described it not just as a physical event, but as something that had been planned across multiple layers at the same time. He said it would begin with systems going down, power, communications, the infrastructure that a modern country depends on every minute of every day. He said those would be targeted first, not by accident, not as side effects, but as deliberate first moves, because a country that cannot communicate clearly and cannot keep its systems running is already partway broken before anyone fires a single shot. Then would come the missiles. He said that clearly. He said the attack on American soil would be undeniable, and it would be connected directly to Iran. He said this would not be a secret or a matter of debate. It would be open. The connection would be clear, and the American people and the American government would have no room left to wonder who had done it or why. But he said the missiles were not the most dangerous part. He said the most dangerous part of the attack was not what it would do to buildings or infrastructure, or even to the people who were physically in its path. The most dangerous part was what it would do to the mind of the country. He said the exhaustion had been designed to lower the defenses before the attack came. So when the attack came, people who would normally have been clear-headed and able to respond were already drained, already confused, already carrying a heaviness that made it harder to think and harder to act. The timing was not coincidental. The 3 days between the exhaustion reaching its peak and the attack beginning was not a gap. It was a calculation. He said that the attack would do what large, sudden, violent events always do to a population. It would create panic. It would create grief. It would create anger. But on top of all of that, on top of people who were already exhausted and already confused, it would create a despair that went deeper than any of those things, a feeling that the world had become something unrecognizable, that the ground under every assumption a person had made about safety and normalcy had just been pulled away. And into that despair, he said, very specific voices would move, voices that had been waiting for exactly this moment, offering answers, offering comfort, offering direction, offering solutions. And some of those voices would be genuine, and some would not be. And the exhaustion and the confusion and the grief would make it much harder for people to tell the difference. He opened the scroll a little further and kept speaking. He moved to what would follow the attack, the consequences that would spread outward from it like rings on water when a stone is dropped. The first thing he described was the global tension. He said that the attack would pull into the open lines that had always existed between nations but had been managed quietly, held back by careful diplomacy and shared economic interests. Those lines would no longer be held back. Countries would have to choose sides in a way that could no longer be avoided or delayed. He said that alliances which had existed for decades would be tested by this. Some would hold, some would fracture. He said that there would be a realignment happening at the level of nations that the world had not seen since the last time a great war reorganized everything. He said the tension would not immediately become a full Third World War. He said there would be moments when it seemed like it might, moments when decisions were being made that could push the whole situation past the point of return. He said those moments would come more than once, and he said the people making those decisions would be carrying more responsibility than almost any human beings had ever carried. The weight of choosing between options where every option had terrible costs. He said the world would hold its breath multiple times in the period that was coming, and that each time it held its breath, things would be changed by the exhale, regardless of which direction the decisions went. The world was being reorganized. Whether people wanted that or not, whether anyone had voted for it or not, it was happening. He then spoke about the economy. He spoke about this at some length, and I want to try to capture it as carefully as I can, because I think it is one of the things people need to hear most clearly right now. He said that the economic shaking would begin with the attack, but would not end with it. He said that the systems holding the global economy together had become very interconnected, and when something large enough happened to one part of those systems, the effects moved through everything else faster than most people understood was possible. He said banks would come under pressure. He said that certain currencies would begin to move in directions that would alarm people who watched those things closely. He said that supply chains that were already fragile, already having been weakened by previous crises, would find themselves under a stress they could not absorb. He said there would be businesses that closed, not small businesses alone, large ones, ones that people had assumed were permanent fixtures of the landscape. He said there would be job losses that happened quickly, and in numbers that would be hard for the official systems to absorb. He said people who had savings would watch the value of those savings become uncertain in ways they had not prepared for and had not thought to prepare for because nothing in their recent experience had told them to. He said the hardest part of the economic shaking would not be the numbers. It would be what the numbers did to people's sense of the world. He said that when a person has worked carefully and lived responsibly and done everything they were told to do in order to build a stable life, and then watches that stability become uncertain through no fault of their own, something breaks in them that goes beyond the financial. A belief in fairness breaks. A trust in institutions breaks. A sense that the rules of the world are consistent and apply to everyone breaks. He said that breaking would happen in a lot of people at the same time. And broken trust, he said, is one of the hardest things to rebuild. He said that the economic difficulty would not last forever, but he said that the period of it would be long enough and sharp enough to change how an entire generation thought about money and security and what it meant to be safe. He said young people who grew up inside this period would make choices shaped by it for the rest of their lives, in ways they might not even consciously understand. Then he moved to the third thing, the spiritual searching. And when he began speaking about this, something in his voice changed slightly. Not in a way I can fully describe. It was as if this was the thing he most wanted me to understand. As if of everything he was revealing, this was the part that mattered to him most personally. He said that human beings were not built to live only on what they could see and touch and measure. He said that there was something in every person, something placed there by design that reached beyond the visible world, that reached for meaning. He said that in comfortable times, people found many ways to quiet that reaching. Distractions, pleasures, routines, the filling of days with busy things. None of those things were wrong in themselves, but they could be used to avoid the deeper questions. And for a long time, a great many people had been using them exactly that way. He said that what was coming would take away a lot of those distractions. The routines would break. The comfort would become uncertain. The things that had been filling the days would not be available in the same way anymore. And in the quiet that would be left when those things were gone, the deeper questions would rise up, loud and urgent and impossible to push back down. Questions like, why am I here? Like, what is the point of all of this? Like, is there something more than what I can see in front of me? Like, what do I actually believe when everything I counted on has been taken away? He said that people would turn to faith in great numbers. He said churches and houses of worship would be fuller than they had been in many years, not because it was fashionable, not because someone told them to, but because they would be desperate for something real and solid in the things of faith, when approached with an honest and humble heart, had a way of providing something that nothing else in the world provided. He said that some people would find in that searching a peace that would carry them through the hardest days, a peace that he said was real, not imagined, not manufactured, but genuinely real. And he said that this, the turning of people back toward God, was one of the only truly good things that would come out of all the pain, that the suffering would push people back toward something that had been waiting for them. He said this quietly, and with something in his face that looked like it mattered to him personally, like the spiritual awakening of people was something he cared about deeply. Then he moved to the fourth thing, the hidden things coming into the open. He said it plainly. He said that the attack and everything that followed it would function like a bright light turned on suddenly in a dark room. And bright lights do not let things stay hidden. Everything that had been in the dark would become visible. He said there were things being kept hidden in governments, in corporations, in institutions that people trusted and depended on, arrangements that had been made without the knowledge of the people those arrangements affected, money that had moved in directions it was never supposed to move, decisions made in private rooms that had public consequences that the public was never told the truth about. He said that people in positions of power had been using those positions for purposes that served themselves rather than the people they were supposed to serve. And they had been able to do this because no one was looking carefully enough. He said the attack would change that. He said that crisis has a way of demanding accountability in ways that ordinary times do not. Documents that had been kept out of reach would come out. People who had stayed silent for years out of fear or loyalty, or because they had calculated that the risk of speaking was too high, would find that calculation changing. Investigations that had been slowed or stopped would be picked up again. He said the process would not be clean. It would not happen all at once. There would be denial and resistance, and people trying to protect themselves. But the truth would keep coming. He said the attack had broken something open that could not easily be closed again. He said that what would be revealed would be painful for people to hear. It would damage trust in things that had been trusted for a long time. It would make people feel that they had been misled, that they had believed things that were not true, that the world was not the way they had been told it was. That feeling, he said, was a hard one to sit with. But he said things that are hidden do not heal. They stay sick in the dark. They only begin to heal when they come into the light. And the light, no matter how uncomfortable, was better than the continued hiding. He paused here. He looked down at the scroll and then back at me. And then he said something that I was not prepared for. He said that there was more. That what he had described so far was not the complete picture. That underneath the physical events, underneath the attack and the tension and the economic shaking, there was something deeper being attempted, something that went to the level of the human mind itself. He said that the people behind this, Iran and the others who had worked alongside them, had not been thinking only in terms of land and power and physical domination. He said they had been studying human beings for a very long time, not in the way a doctor studies a patient to help them, in the way a person studies a system to find out how to control it. They had studied what people believed, what made people follow, what made people question, what made people resist, and what made people give up. And they had built a plan around what they found. He said the goal was not to conquer by force alone. He said that forcing people created resistance, and resistance was expensive and unpredictable. The real goal was to change what people believed, without people knowing that the change was happening. To make the thoughts that were being introduced feel like the person's own thoughts. To make the direction being pushed feel like the direction the person had freely chosen. He said the exhaustion that had been introduced into the air was part of this. Tired people are easier to lead. Confused people ask fewer questions. People whose emotions are heavy and uncertain reach for comfort wherever it is offered, even when the thing offering comfort is not safe. He said that the exhaustion was not just a physical side effect. It was a preparation. It lowered the natural resistance that a clear-headed, well-rested, emotionally grounded person would have. He said that as things unfolded, there would be voices coming forward with answers. Reassuring, confident, authoritative voices. Voices that would explain what had happened and what needed to happen next. Voices that came with plans and technologies and promises of recovery and relief. He said some of those voices would be genuine. He said others would be part of the same plan that had created the problem, offering the solution while concealing that they had engineered the crisis. He said the question that would matter most in the days ahead was not what can help me. The question that would matter most was who can actually be trusted, and he said that question would not have easy answers. It would require people to look carefully at what they were being told, to ask who benefits from this, to test what they heard against what they could see with their own eyes. He said that the capacity to do that, to look at something and see what it actually was rather than what it claimed to be, would be one of the most important things a person could develop in the time that was coming. He said something else that I have thought about every day since I came back. He said that the weapons that would matter most in what was coming were not the ones that could be seen. He said that truth was a weapon. He said that staying clear-headed when everything around you was designed to make you confused was a form of resistance. He said that genuine community, people who were honest with each other and cared for each other and told each other the truth, even when it was hard, that kind of community would be more protective than any wall. He said there would be people who held on, not because they were special or because they had resources or because they were in the right geographic location, just because they chose to. He said they would be ordinary people. Teachers, farmers, parents, tradespeople, people of every background and age. What they would have in common was a decision to hold on to what was real when a lot of what was around them was designed to make real things seem doubtful. A decision to stay honest, a decision to stay kind to the people in front of them, a decision to keep their faith even when circumstances argued against it. He said those people would be the ones who carried the light through the darkest part of what was coming, not heroically, not dramatically, just consistently, day after day, choosing to be honest and caring and grounded in something real. He said that the survival that mattered most was not physical. He said that the survival of the spirit, the keeping alive of something true and human inside people even when the world around them was going very wrong, that was the survival that everything else depended on. He began to close the scroll. I watched his hands as he rolled it slowly. I felt something rise up in me, a kind of urgency, a feeling that I was not ready for this to end. There was so much I still did not understand. There was so much I wanted to ask. I opened my mouth, and the only thing I could find to say was the simplest question. I said, "Is there hope?" He was quiet for a moment. He looked at me with those eyes that had seen everything and understood everything. And then he said yes. He said it without any decoration. Just yes. And then he said that hope was not a guarantee that pain would be avoided. He said hope was not a promise that things would not get very hard before they got better. He said hope was the truth that the story was not over, that what looked like an ending was not an ending, that the choices being made right now, in these days and weeks, by ordinary people in ordinary places, had consequences that extended far beyond what any of those people could see from where they were standing. He said that every person who chose honesty in a moment when lying was easier was doing something that mattered. Every person who chose to care for someone in front of them when they had very little left to give was doing something that mattered. Every person who kept their faith when the circumstances around them were pushing hard against it was doing something that mattered. He said those things were not small. He said those things were not naive or weak. He said those things were the strongest things human beings had ever done, and they had always been the thing that carried humanity through its worst moments. Then he looked at me for a long moment, and he said that it was not my time to stay. He said I had something to do. He said I was being sent back. I did not fully understand everything that meant at the time. I only understood that I was not staying in that courtroom, and I understood with a certainty I could not explain that the reason I was not staying was connected to what he had just finished telling me. I felt the light in the room change. He raised one hand, not dramatically, just a simple movement, like a person acknowledging someone across a room, and I felt myself being pulled backward through the light, through the quiet, through something that felt like the space between one breath and the next. And then I was back. I was in the hospital. There were lights above me and sounds around me, and the feeling of a bed underneath me and people nearby moving with purpose. I opened my eyes and I saw the ceiling of a room I recognized, and I lay there for a long moment, just breathing, just being alive in a body that had, for a period of time that I cannot accurately measure, not been alive at all. That was the 17th of February. I lay in that bed for days afterward, and I did not tell anyone what I had experienced. I told myself that I would not tell anyone. I made that decision, and I held it for weeks. I was a doctor. I had spent my whole life in the world of evidence and proof. I knew exactly how this story would sound coming out of my mouth. I knew what my colleagues would think. I knew what most people would think. And beyond the concern for how I would be received, there was something else, something more personal. What I had been shown was so large and so heavy that I was not sure I was ready to carry it out into the world. I was not sure I was the right person to carry it. But I am watching the news right now. I am watching what is happening between America and Iran. I am reading the reports that are coming in every day. I am watching the tension building in ways that feel exactly like what I was shown. I am hearing people describe a strange tiredness, a heaviness, a confusion that they cannot explain. I am seeing the pieces fall into place one by one, and I know that I do not have the option of staying quiet anymore. The reason I was sent back was to tell this story. The angel said so clearly. He said my role was to share what I had been shown, and I have taken too long already. So this is me, Dr. Harold James Whitfield, 82 years old, a physician for over 40 years. A man who built his entire professional life on the belief that only what could be proven deserved to be believed. Telling you that on the 17th of February I died in a hospital hallway and was shown things by an angel in an empty courtroom, and those things are now beginning to happen in the world around us. Watch for the exhaustion. If you are feeling it, or if people around you are describing it, understand that it is not just stress. Something has been put into the air. The heaviness you are feeling is not coming from inside you. It was put there deliberately, to lower your defenses, to make what is coming easier for the people who planned it. And know that 3 days after that exhaustion reaches its peak, if what I was shown holds true, what follows will be unmistakable. Get close to the people who matter to you. Get honest with yourself and with them. Find what you actually believe when you strip away everything comfortable and look at the thing underneath. Hold on to that, because when the ground starts moving, the only things that hold are the ones that go deep enough to reach something solid. I am not asking anyone to take my word for this. I am asking people to watch what is happening and ask themselves whether what they are seeing matches what I have described. I am asking people to take seriously the possibility that what is coming is not an accident and not random and not something that simply happened to us. And I am asking people to make choices now, while there is still time to make them freely, about what they are going to hold on to when holding on becomes difficult. That is all I know how to offer. 40 years of medicine and 1 day in an empty courtroom, and the story that came out of both of those things. Take it for what it is worth to you. But take it. My name is Dr. Harold James Whitfield. The 17th of February changed everything I believed. And I am done being quiet about it.